Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Izuku was thrown away by everyone for being quirkless, part 1, subscribe if you enjoy the video, let's begin the story. He was 2 years old when he first started to admire heroes, and like any other kid was anxiously waiting for his quirk. He was 4 when he was declared quirkless, and was subject to the bullying of all his classmates, while his teachers didn't even bat an eye in his direction. He was 5 when he heard his father, being a fire-based pro hero working overseas, roaring over the telephone at having a quirkless useless child. A waste of space, blaming Inko and her family's side for the weak quirks. He was 7 when his father, finally having come back from overseas and knowing that he was quirkless, saw him covered in burns and bruises, his mother protecting him, and burnt down the house in his rage. The house roared into flames, and Inko had tried to hide her son in a cupboard as the support beam fell and snapped her spine as she was closing the door. Midoriya was 7 when he was declared dead to the world, having died in the flames, along with the rest of the Midoriya household. Midoriya woke up, sitting in a pile of ashes. He rubbed his head, and his eyesight felt fuzzy. Slowly, the ringing in his ears had disappeared, and he sat up, groaning. He looked at his surroundings. He knew where he was. He recognized it. He was in a very remote area, where only gangsters and stragglers roamed. He had no idea what had happened from when he felt the searing heat of the fire licking against his skin to how he ended up in some alleyway. It was obvious the house had exploded, seeing as he was quite a distance away from his home. It was then he registered the stinging pain in his shoulder. Grabbing it, he winced as he realized that there was a piece of metal stuck in his shoulder, either a pipe or some metal reinforcement from the house. He was lucky that with all his classmates and Kaken's bullying, he had built up quite a decent amount of pain tolerance. Still, that didn't stop him from hissing in pain as he jerked the metal pole out of his shoulder. He was lucky that it just tore the muscle and didn't break any bones. Suddenly, a scream rang out in the air. And another lucky break for the green bean. He was wearing a hoodie, even though some of it was black and burned, but he was able to pull his hood over his face as he gripped the metal pipe tightly, slowly trudging over to investigate. He found a woman pinned against a wall as a man held a knife at her throat. He wanted to scream, to yell for help, but he quickly covered his mouth. Yelling would probably startle the man, and he might hurt her in an accident. Then, all of a sudden, he didn't know why he moved, but his feet just did. Pipe in hand, he whacked it against the man's skull. He didn't even see what hit him as he crumpled to the ground, groaning. The man quickly got up, and his arm transformed into a hammer as he snarled and attempted to smash the boy into sludge. Horrified, the small boy took a step back, then another, before he gave a yelp and fell down. He watched as the man stalked closer to him before suddenly, something latched onto his neck as he was forced to look upwards. Aizawa Shouda was thinking. Here he was, perched over an alleyway. He saw a man holding a woman at knife point and wanted to step in. However, he didn't know how to do that without accidentally injuring the woman, since scaring the man might make him accidentally slit the woman's throat. He eyed the boy in the corner as he covered his mouth. Must be her son. But that thought vanished as the boy ran out, smashing the man's head with a pipe as he went down. Eyeing the man carefully, Aizawa realized that he wasn't knocked out as he got up again and transformed his arm into a hammer. The boy had fallen as he tried to get away, but Aizawa focused on the villain. He couldn't waste the opportunity that the boy had given him. He jumped down into the alleyway as he latched his capture weapon around the villain's neck and shot down, his boots kissing the villain's face. He eyed the small boy just to make sure he was okay, but he saw 2 large green eyes eyeing him. He quickly changed his focus as the man got up and tried to smash him, but Aizawa just activated his quirk and smacked the man into a wall, knocking him out. He made sure that the villain was really out cold as the woman had already called the police and was screaming at the top of her lungs. When he turned back to find the boy, he was gone. Eraserhead. He had seen Eraserhead. The Eraserhead. The underground hero who worked in the shadows and under the cover of the night. Normally, he would have been ecstatic, but he couldn't bring himself to be happy that he had seen such a rare fight. His mom was dead, he had seen her die. His dad was the one that tried to kill them both. Midoriya stopped running as he leaned against a wall for support, panting, trying to get as much air into his lungs as possible. His brain seemed to have finally started up and his mind started to process what he had just seen. Eraserhead's quirk can cancel out any quirk, probably except mutant types because they're extra limbs. He fights using his capture weapon, speed and agility, immobilizing the target before getting in close to strike. Eraserhead fights Quirkless. That last thought rang in his head. He blinked, trying to process what he had just realized. Eraserhead's quirk only cancel out quirks, but that just evens the playing field. He just makes the fight into a quirkless one. A small grin appeared on his face. His mom was dead. His dad was probably a criminal by now. But he had hoped that he could become a hero. Just because society won't accept a quirkless hero doesn't mean I can't save anyone. Aizawa sighed as he closed the door. His roommate, Yamada Hisashi, looked up from the table as he sipped a cup of tea. "You okay, Shouda? You don't look so good." "I'm fine, I just saw a kid." "A kid?" Yamada frowned, putting down the newspaper he was reading. "I thought you hated kids. That's why you were complaining about having to homeroom a first-year class, weren't you?" Aizawa turned to his blonde friend, grunting, "I don't know. There was this guy holding a woman at knife point and I was trying to figure out how to get the guy without hurting the woman by accident when he just ran in and smacked the guy with a metal pole. I was busy dealing with the guy and when I was done he was gone." "So? Could it be her son?" Yamada suggested. He massaged his temples. "I thought so at first too. Any normal kid would just run away or scream, but it seemed like he covered his mouth to prevent himself from making a sound, like he knew that startling the man might make him hurt her. He was small. Pretty small. Looked to be 6 or 7 years old. Too young to know how to react in situations like that. Who knows, maybe he has an analysis quirk or a high IQ quirk or something." Yamada shrugged again, patting his friend on the back. Midoriya was a fast learner. He was quickly able to analyze fighting styles just by looking at them. He found the strengths, the weaknesses, and how possibly to improve them without as much as a glance. Actually learning how to fight back was a problem, since he normally never threw a punch whenever he got bullied. Since he had started training himself from a younger age, Midoriya was very flexible. He could do splits and all sorts of other stretches that others found it hard to do, and also realized he was double-jointed, making him unusually flexible, and made it a lot easier for him as he leapt and rolled about on rooftops. He already learned a bit of parkour, mostly from people he had seen doing it before, and a bit, read. A lot of trial and error that resulted in him breaking his fingers and dislocating his shoulders. He currently resides in the Dagaba Municipal Beach Park, surrounded by tons of junk. No one really went there since there were so many broken appliances and space for the boy to train and use. He didn't need much, just a shelter over his head. He did eventually make a home out of 2 minibuses. He had no idea how they managed to wash up on the beach that just happened to be side by side. He had melted off the walls between the buses and welded them together with scrap metal and removed all the seats to create a decently sized place to live in. That, and the fact that his home was currently surrounded by so much junk that no one would even suspect that someone lived there. With his knowledge, Midoriya was able to fix up one of the phones that someone had thrown away. Seriously, he just had to replace the cracked screen and fix the battery while grumbling about e-waste and its effects on the environment. He also made his own equipment for fighting. He had a pair of goggles that allowed him to zoom in and gave him much better vision and an air filter voice-changing mask. He didn't want to bring too much equipment in case it weighed him down, but he did have a knife that he hid in his belt. He wore a green hoodie that someone had trashed. Seriously, stop trashing perfectly good stuff, black tights, and matching black combat boots. He also had a belt with his knife and a compartment where he kept his phone, some painkillers, antiseptic, and a small roll of bandages in case he needed to patch himself up. He stood up from where he was sitting on the ground, grinning. He was ready to face the world and what it was about to throw at him. Aizawa sighed for the umpteenth time that week as he lay on his desk, his phone in his right hand, as he rubbed his eyes. "You okay? You've kept sighing this week, and I'm pretty sure it's not from those 3 remaining students in your homeroom class." Snipe asked him, patting the underground hero on the back. "I'm fine. A villain got a flash bomb in my face last night and my eyes hurt." Aizawa groaned, reaching out with his free hand for the flask of coffee on his desk. It was common knowledge that because of his quirk, his eyes were a lot more sensitive and even normal bright lights were unbearable for him after a while. He gulped it down, feeling the warm liquid trickle down his throat. "It's just that relatively new vigilante, right? Green hoodie, goggles, mask. Yeah? The green one that's called Yuzuki, right?" Aizawa blinked. "Wait, when was he named?" Snipe took out his phone before showing Aizawa an article from that morning. "You just had a class, so I didn't expect you to see it, but here." Aizawa took the phone, quickly reading through the article. It stated how a guy was saved from a bunch of gangsters and when he was asked for a name, the vigilante had hummed before quickly saying that his name was Yuzuki. He quickly handed the phone back to the sniper. "According to Tsukauchi, he had received a package that was addressed to me from him. Hisashi went out to buy something and he agreed to pick it up on the way for me." Aizawa sighed again. As if on cue, the cockatoo blonde poked his head into the teacher's lounge. He carefully placed the box on the table and immediately noticed the "please handle with care" that was written all over it. "You think it's malicious?" Snipe asked, leaning over the hero's shoulder. There was a card attached to it and Aizawa opened it. "Dear Detective Tsukauchi, I know you probably have a good reason to throw this out, but please can you pass this over to Eraserhead for me? I think he works in UA, but the security system is scary and I don't want to break into a hero school and I have no idea where he lives. I promise you it's nothing harmful. Izuki, oh. A secret admirer. Midnight popped up behind them, what is it? It looks like a kid's handwriting, so I doubt it can be that bad. Worst case it's probably a prank or something. Snipe shrugged. If anything goes wrong, I'm blaming you. Aizawa grumbled, opening the box to reveal a pair of goggles. It looked exactly like his, and everyone looked at the gift. It wasn't until Aizawa picked it up when he realized that there was a thin lens along the eyepiece. Aizawa blinked, handling the goggles with care. It didn't seem dangerous, but who knew what the vigilante wanted with him? That's so sweet. Yamada grinned, snatching the goggles and putting it on his eyes. Look. We match. He started posing, and one of his regular poses resulted in him staring directly into a lamp that was on his desk. Hey, it's dim. There was another piece of paper in the box, and confused, Aizawa unfolded it. Dear Eraserhead, I kinda made these goggles for you. I tried to make it as close as possible to yours, but I have no idea how close I was in my attempt. It shouldn't be much different from your regular ones, but I added a lens that I made. It should help you protect your eyesight in case you get into a situation when your opponent has smokescreen or pepper spray. Trust me, pepper spray sucks. It also adjusts the amount of light that enters your eyes, so if you get hit by a flash grenade again you should be fine. You should be able to see properly no matter how bright or dark it is. I don't think you saw me yesterday, but I saw you struggling a bit after you got hit with a flash grenade, so I thought it was an appropriate time to give it to you. Also, I believe your eyes are more sensitive since your quirk lies in your eyes, so you should take care of them. Izuki, yes, thanks for saving my life 6 years ago. Midnight just shook the voice hero and handed the goggles back to Aizawa. Honestly, this Izuki guy seems like a nice kid. You saved him 6 years ago. Aizawa shook his head, no idea. 6 years is a long time, I don't really know. He stared at the goggles, contemplating if he wanted to try them or not. Yamada was perfectly fine wearing them, and he had to admit he was a bit curious. Try 'em on. She urged, and Aizawa swapped out his goggles for the newer ones. It was a perfect fit. Aizawa leaned back on his chair, and for once, he was able to stare at the ceiling without the headache that would start at the back of his head as the lens automatically darkened to reduce the amount of light entering his eyes. Excuse me, All Might. A 13-year-old boy with green hair ran up to the number 1 hero, who had just saved a bunch of other people from a particularly nasty electric villain. Without his gear, it was almost impossible to deduce that Midoriya was Izuki. Can I ask a question? Why not, my boy? Ask away. All Might replied, grinning. Do you think a quirkless person could be a hero? Honestly, I don't think so. Many of the villains with quirks now can be especially dangerous, even for those with suitable quirks to protect themselves, so The hero stopped talking, realizing the boy had disappeared. It was a surprise to see a boy around his age, surrounded by a bunch of guys wearing the same uniform. Hey. Freak. The poor purple-haired boy was punched in the gut and he winced, his school bag strewn against a wall. He was punched in the face, but he managed to bring out his own arms to protect himself. The group of boys continued to laugh and tease him as the boy tried to defend himself and not say a single word except cries of pain as more swears and profanities rained down on him. Villainous quirk. You can't be a hero. Freak. Hey. Midoriya couldn't take it anymore. It reminded him of Kakin and his friends, his father, his teachers, and leaving him alone. Crap. Isn't that the new Vigilante? The really fast and agile one? One of the boys trembled, holding back another from throwing another punch. Shit. Yeah, let's go. Shinsu looked upwards, but he immediately felt nauseous as his legs gave way. He didn't remember hitting the ground. Midoriya managed to catch the boy before he collapsed, though he was completely out of it. Damn it. They're always bullies. Midoriya grumbled, carefully adjusting the taller boy so that he could carry him without worsening his injuries. Stealing a glance at the bag on the ground, Midoriya picked it up before pretty much carrying him out of the alley. Midoriya crouched on a rooftop, surveying the area. He had knocked out several criminals, but then the police had come after him, so he had escaped onto a rooftop to hide. The boy he had saved was still unconscious, but Midoriya had pretty much figured that out. He had a broken rib and seemed to be suffering from malnutrition. He heard footsteps behind him and he whirled around, staring directly at Eraserhead. Hi. He asked uncertainty. He didn't know if Eraserhead was going to attack or not, but he honestly didn't want to fight his favorite hero. Eraserhead had moved up from second to first. He wondered if his former idol even knew Eraserhead existed, since he was fighting practically quirkless. Midoriya knew that he himself was pretty good and fighting, but still, All Might's words stung. Izuki, huh? Eraserhead replied, walking closer to the vigilante. Did you get my gift? He asked. The Eraserhead sighed, tapping his goggles. How did you even know the size? I observed. The vigilante rubbed his arm sheepishly. I kinda look up to you, Eraserhead. Oh? Eraserhead looked at Yuzuki. I have to admit, I'm impressed that you know of me and that you can even know where I was working. Yuzuki snorted, you practically wear the same thing to UA. It'd be impossible to not tell. Eraserhead sighed, you do know I have to catch you, right? This time, Yuzuki was alarmed. What? I haven't done anything to break any laws. Every time I fight someone, it's in self-defense. And I never used a quirk in all those fights. Blinking, Eraserhead sighed again and released his scarf. I suppose that's true. Though I should still bring you in. The media is labeling you as a vigilante. Yuzuki snapped, I don't care what the media says. This society is shit. They just want everything to be flashy, so more people watch. They just trample others underfoot if they don't have a quirk that makes bright lights and explosions. He didn't know why, but he started feeling bad for the kid. What makes you say so? I saved a kid who was getting bullied. They said he had a villainous quirk. As if quirks decide who's good and who's bad. It's how you use it. Yuzuki grumbled. Izawa had to agree. He himself had been subject to the same taunts when he was in UA, but at least he had Yamada and Kayama who had his back. It seemed like whoever Yuzuki had encountered, he was all alone. Do you think a person with a non-offensive quirk can be a hero? Yuzuki looked right at Izawa. He was about to answer, but they were distracted by a loud bang. Trying to find the source of the sound, Eraserhead looked away. When he finally looked back, Yuzuki was nowhere to be seen. A piece of paper was left in his wake. He picked it up. Think about my question. Followed by a series of numbers. Eraserhead pocketed the paper before setting out to find the villains that had disrupted his conversation. Who the hell was this kid? Shinsu groaned, blinking, as the haze in his vision cleared. He found himself staring at the roof of a bus, utterly confused. He managed to sit up, rubbing his bruised ribs, as he coughed. You're awake? A voice next to him rang out. Shinsu turned his head as he looked at the person beside him, not sure what to expect. He definitely wasn't expecting to see a boy wearing goggles and a green hoodie with a metallic mask hanging around his neck, sitting on the ground in a corner. The same guy who saved him from the bullies. Shinsu blinked again, trying to understand what was going on. You're in my home. You were being bullied yesterday, and I saved you, and you passed out, and the boy immediately clamped his hands over his mouth, muffling his words. He took a deep breath before sighing, sorry, I'm sure you're pretty confused right now. I'll give you some time to think things over. I'll be back in 5. With that, the boy got up and walked out of the room, which was covered in a lot of windows for some reason, even though there wasn't any light entering the room from the outside. The light in the room came from the strips of lights on the ceiling, and even the ceiling looked way too low for it to be a regular house. Shinsu blinked, looking across the room, trying to take in his surroundings. He was lying on some sort of mattress, and his bag was leaning against the wall next to him. What looked like his uniform was folded and placed on the table across the room, and he just realized he wasn't wearing his shirt. His wallet and his keys, which were originally in his pants pockets, were sitting on his uniform. The boy came back into the room, carefully placing a glass of water and a small loaf of bread beside the purple-headed student. Here. You've been passed out for a while, so you're probably a bit thirsty. Also, it's a Saturday, so don't worry about school. Shinsu greedily gulped down the water before sighing. He took a good look at the boy, realizing that his bullies were right, and he looked exactly like the media had described him as. Except he was short. Really short. And Shinsu was not expecting this kind of attitude from the vigilante rumored to have taken down quite a few of the rougher ruffians on the streets. Shinsu remained silent, years of mistreatment from his family and classmates conditioned him to remain silent and not talk unless it was necessary. He even refused to look him in the eye and opted to stare at his empty glass. You know, you don't need permission to talk. The boy must have picked up on thoughts, and Shinsu looked up at the boy, didn't I? Ch. The boy snorted, your quirk is response-based, I guess. I swear I have no idea what's wrong with children these days. Shinsu mutely nodded before asking, are you really Yuzuki? The boy lightened up and laughed, yeah. I'm Yuzuki. I have a real name, but there are a number of reasons why I won't tell you. And you are? Shinsu blinked. Yuzuki clearly had taken his wallet out of his pocket, so why didn't he know his name? Personal stuff. Don't worry about it. I don't like snooping into other people's things unless they're bad. Yuzuki grinned. That was his reason, Shinsu Hitachi. Alright. Yuzuki procured another bottle of water for himself from somewhere and sipped it. Both of them remained quiet for a while before Shinsu spoke up, so why did you save me? It was the right thing to do. Plus I don't like bullies, Yuzuki said as he pulled his mask back onto his face, immediately changing his voice to something slightly deeper. He then pulled his goggles up to rest on his forehead and Shinsu caught sight of the bright green eyes looking back at him. What happened? I want to be a hero. But because of my quirk my classmates say I should be a villain. Yuzuki frowned, and Shinsu could see the emerald eyes gleaming in anger. I heard those damned kids say that. What quirk do you have? Yuzuki asked. Brainwashing quirk. Shinsu looked away, refusing to look Yuzuki in the eyes. After all, he was so nice, why would you want to associate with a person with a villainous quirk? He froze. Yuzuki already knew his quirk was something response-based and still wanted to hold a conversation with him. And allowed him to speak freely. Shinsu couldn't help himself and blurted out, don't you think they're right? That I should be a villain with this quirk? That it's useless for me to try to be a hero? That Shinsu stopped abruptly when he saw Yuzuki looking at him intensely as he flinched. Trust me when I say this. I use these to be able to listen to things more clearly and from a further distance. Yuzuki dug two things out of his ears and Shinsu bleakly realized that his quirk didn't even work on Yuzuki because of them. Yuzuki was going to kill him and he wouldn't be able to do anything and Yuzuki slammed his earpieces on the ground, crushing them to metal shards. Shinsu jumped at the sound and stared at Yuzuki incredulously. He had just destroyed the only thing that kept him safe from his quirk. Their quirk is amazing. Imagine, there's a hostage situation and you can just brainwash the villain into letting go. You can convince someone and prevent them from committing suicide. Yuzuki got up and squatted down in front of the stunned boy. Shinsu curled in on himself on instinct, bracing himself for whatever Yuzuki might do to him. He didn't expect Yuzuki to gently ruffle his fluffy purple hair. Stop doubting yourself, Shinsu. You can be a hero. That was all it took for all the walls Shinsu had put up to protect himself from everyone's harsh words, to rein in his emotions, and not let anyone know how hurt he was, to crumble, and he couldn't stop himself from unconsciously leaning into Yuzuki's touch and crying into Yuzuki's hoodie. You want to train me? Shino's eyes widened at Yuzuki's offer. Yuzuki nodded, your quirk is powerful, but if you want to get into UA, and I'm assuming you do because that's the best hero school in Eastern Japan, you need to train. The UA exam is made for flashy, destructive quirks, and while I say it's practical because of the sheer number of applicants they have every year, it is not fair to those like you, who have powerful, but non-offensive quirks. And from what I've heard, you have to fight robots. A brainwashing quirk definitely won't get you anywhere. But if you train and get stronger, you'll have a chance at getting into the hero course. Unless you want to get into the general education course and transfer in via the sports festival. His own childish curiosity that had been suppressed for so long, combined with the fact that Yuzuki practically said he was free to talk, took over and he couldn't help from blurting out, but you're a vigilante, right? And you have villains to catch and heroes chase after you? Why help me when you have so many other things on your plate? See? You're thinking of others and putting them before yourself. Yuzuki was probably grinning behind his mask. I had the same dream. I wanted to be a hero. But because of my unfortunate circumstances, I lost the chance. There's no way I can even enter a school, let alone become a hero. Yuzuki sighed before asking, are you still willing to let me train you? Shinsu nodded, yeah. So? Where do you live? Yuzuki asked. Why do you need to know where I live? Shinsu groaned, his ribs still aching, but not as much as before. You have school, and I'm not gonna train you in my house. The alley I picked you up in is also a fair distance from here. Yuzuki replied, plus I'm trying to keep as much personal information about me a secret as possible. Shinsu nodded, I can bring you there. Alright. I'll have to blindfold you though. I'm not letting anyone know where I live, not even you. From then on, the duo had a schedule. On Mondays to Fridays, Midoriya would train Shinsu on strengthening his muscles or working on his stamina. Saturday afternoons were for training him on different fighting techniques to let Shinsu get used to working several different kinds of muscles at once, and Sunday mornings were for them to discuss how to better utilize his quirk in battle. Shinsu did start to worry about Yuzuki though. He spent all his time out of school with him, teaching him and training him, and would spend the night patrolling and catching villains. He really wondered when the vigilante slept. Hopefully while he was in school. Any luck on finding Absorber? Yamada asked Aizawa as he sighed and shook his head. Absorber was a decently new hero who had the power of shock absorption and had disappeared mysteriously a week ago. Nezu is getting worried. Absorber isn't the first person to disappear and definitely wouldn't be the last. Aizawa groaned, plopping himself onto the sofa. There were cases of people disappearing, but it had escalated until a person disappeared each week, the only thing in common being those with powerful quirks. Heroes were also amongst those kidnapped. About a month ago, Generate, a reckless hero with regeneration abilities that graduated from Shiketsu High School a few years ago, also disappeared. Nezu assumed that all these disappearing cases were connected. What about your little vigilante son? Yamada asked, trying to keep a straight face, but eventually burst into laughter when Izawa let out an exaggerated groan. Yamada himself hadn't had any contact with Yuzuki, but he did know that he liked to pass Izawa information about villains, either through indirect means like hidden in villains' pockets or dumping them with Tsukauchi. Each time, his information has been vital to stopping some dangerous and illegal cases, and Yamada's respect for the Vigilante had increased tenfold, even though what he did was technically illegal. He did manage to save people by passing on information on locations on cases that he had deemed too much for him to handle. Stop calling him that. That little rascal is a pain. Izawa groaned as his phone vibrated. He dug out his phone and he stared at the message he had received. Who is it? Yamada asked, leaning over the couch to peer at Izawa's phone. The message was from someone labeled Green Brat. There were 5 short sentences, followed by a series of numbers and a picture. Your shift ended. Sorry. Check pockets. Important. Open in a private place. The picture was of Crusher, a villain that could turn his skin into rock, knocked out with his wrists tied up with a cable tie. Yamada raised an eyebrow, and it took a few seconds for the pro-heroes to realize the string of numbers was coordinates. So want to find out what the green bean left for us? Lucky for them, it didn't take long for Izawa and Yamada to find the downed villain. In fact, it just happened to be in the alleyway just a few roads down from their home. President Mick called the police to pick up the villain while Izawa searched through the villain's pockets. He finally managed to find a thumb drive in the villain's back pocket. There was a note attached. The security password is the truth, but not true. Izawa had to suppress a groan and just happened to spot a blur of green that had leapt over the alleyway. And you tried to open it? Nezu asked. He had called up Izawa in his office after he had notified him about the thumb drive and the warning the Vigilante had sent him. No. Security in UA is the best, and I'm not risking whatever is in here being compromised. Yuzuki doesn't give us anything unless it's important. Izawa blinked. Nezu knew of Yuzuki's information passing habits, having been the one to sometimes compile the sheer mass of information for any of it to be useful. Nezu nodded, opening the file that was contained in the thumb drive. The first letter of the letter is the letter to use. What? Yamada gazed at the screen. What does that even mean? Nezu thought about it for a while before asking, Izawa, you said you got a note with it. Izawa nodded, taking the letter out and passing it to Nezu. Nezu stared at the letter, then at the computer, then back at the letter for a good 5 minutes before he clapped his paws and laughed. He quickly typed in an 8-letter password. Spittant. The password was accepted. Nezu grinned. What does that even mean? Yamada almost shrieked, but Izawa stopped his quirk in time. He passed you a letter. The first letter of each word in your letter is the letter in the password. Nezu smiled up at the 2 gawking pro-heroes, though one didn't show it as much as the other. Izawa hid his face in his scarf and groaned. Go on and teach. I'll go through these. Nezu grinned, patting both heroes on the back. Nezu, I expelled all my students, remember? Well then, maybe you can talk to Power Loader about making the entrance exam robots more suited for less offensive quirks, since you're so passionate about that. What's going on, Nezu? You never hold an impromptu meeting. Kansas asked, sinking down into his chair. The rest of his colleges were slowly trickling in. We have received some important information that we feel the need to share with you. On your desks are a stack of your quirks and fighting styles weaknesses and possible ways to cover them up for the time being, and some for students here. Nezu said, as everyone started flipping through the 10-ish page stack that was sitting quietly in front of them. When did you have time to do all this? Kayama asked, flipping through all the papers, and I'm not sure you called a meeting just to tell us what we have to improve on. Oh, I didn't compile them. The way Nezu spoke had them all on edge. These were sent to me via Izawa. Wait. Who sent it? All of them were worried. Someone had observed them enough to pick out every single weakness that could be exploited in a fight or when they were teamed with someone and for some reason decided to send it to them. Izuki. Vijima growled, who does that kid think he is? He can't just tell us oh hey you guys are weak. Like he's some important person. Our loader. Everyone turned to Izawa, who never said a thing in meetings. If he spoke up, then it was definitely serious. I assure you this is not some logical ruse from the Vigilante. Even if he does things against the law, he has helped in taking down several villain groups, and he does not do things unless he knows it's out of his power to do so. Basically you're saying you're willing to vouch for me? Kansas asked incredulously. Izawa sighed. They were going to need proof. You remember that case last year? The one with around 150 kidnapped children to be shipped off and sold. And the Yakuza that was trying to make that quirk drug. And that group of villains that destroyed buildings. Izawa spoke in monotone. Everyone nodded. Those were events that the Erasure hero had taken part in, and Kansas asked, so? What does the Vigilante have to do with them? He fed us the information. Nezu grinned. Notes on their quirks and weaknesses, the layouts of their hideouts, important information that was vital to their takedown. Yuzuki gave it to us. We wouldn't even know these events were taking place if not for him. Yuzuki doesn't give us information for no reason. If it's too much for him to handle, and he decided it was necessary for Nezu to interfere, then it's something big. Nezu then immediately brought out a folder with several pictures in it. I doubt any of you want to see this, but these are pictures of the missing heroes. Dead. They were heavily brutalized, and I couldn't even recognize them if the pictures weren't labeled. Yuzuki believes that there is something more than just people disappearing. Nezu continued, opening a Word document. I'm assuming that Eraserhead took this thumb drive to Nezu, either because the school security is strong, or because he tried to open the drive and couldn't get past the password. People are disappearing, and honestly I'm worried for you guys. I personally like Eraserhead and the rest of the UA teachers, and I don't think he wants to lose any of his colleagues, so I compiled some information for you to protect your weak spots. I have a gut feeling they'll go after you guys for your quirks. I'll send more concrete information when I get it. Just please be careful. Regards, Yuzuki. Personally, I was also suspecting more of all these disappearances. Nezu sighed, I don't want to lose any of you. Even if Yuzuki are wrong about them coming after us, people are still going missing at a much faster rate than before, heroes or not. I also wish for you to better yourselves, so that you can not only protect yourselves, but other people. You're all free to go. Bakugo hated everything. He hated how everyone treated Midoriya. He hated how Midoriya would let other people bully him because he was quirkless. All for what? To look cool. What was so cool about ganging up on a helpless little boy who wanted nothing more than to help other people? Midoriya was not a normal kid. Even at a young age, he was smart. He learned things way faster than other kids and made connections where no one thought possible. If he wasn't officially declared quirkless by the doctor, he would have thought Midoriya had an intelligence-boosting quirk. Except that Midoriya was officially declared quirkless. Bakugo definitely knew that Midoriya could still be a hero. He knew that he had to be able to fight without his quirk. He couldn't be too reliant on it, after all. He couldn't say the same for Midoriya. He was too nice, too naive, too willing to believe that he could talk things out. He was too willing to protect himself and other people to even think about attacking offensively. Bakugo didn't want to watch his best friend become a hero, only to die because he was unwilling to attack a villain. Bakugo was reclusive. All his classmates from preschool were in his elementary school, all the way up to middle school. He had no idea what kind of god he had pissed off to ensure he was stuck with the same extras through his entire life. Probably the ones that didn't want him to push Midoriya away, as well. He didn't care much for them. Only Midoriya. The others just followed him around because of his awesome quirk. Midoriya followed because they were friends, and he wanted to repair the relationship that Bakugo had unintentionally shattered. Up till now, Bakugo refused to make friends with anyone else. Especially not those who constantly put him down. He exploded all the time. Midoriya's death had made something in him snap. He was always angry at the world that killed off an innocent child like him. Angry that the world had people that refused to accept some people just didn't have quirks and treated them like they were inferior. Bakugo was lost in his thoughts. Where had he gone wrong? He wanted to push Midoriya and told him if he wanted to be a hero, he couldn't continue letting himself get pushed around by others. What did he end up telling Midoriya? You can't be a hero when you're both quirkless and useless. Bakugo scratched the back of his head. Looking back on it is not the best choice for wording it. He could definitely see how that statement could be misinterpreted in so many ways. He wanted to tell Midoriya that if he trained and stopped letting other people take advantage of him, Midoriya could still be a hero. Midoriya probably interpreted it as his dreams of being a hero being shattered. Because he was powerless. Because no one believes in him. Because no one would give him a chance. Because even his best friend said he couldn't. Bakugo wasn't willing to give up on Midoriya. On Deku, the adorable little boy who would give anything to save others. The only person that Bakugo swore to protect if he couldn't protect himself. He had asked his mother if a quirkless person could become a hero. She said no. He asked his teachers if a quirkless person could become a hero. They said no. He asked Inko if she thought Midoriya could become a hero. She had snapped at him. Yelled at him for being delusional. Shouted that even having a weak useless quirk was better than being quirkless. She had then proceeded to slam the door in his face. Up till now, Bakugo found her reaction weird. Inko had always been kind, happy, never once raising her voice. Only until Deku was declared quirkless. Bakugo had realized that Deku came to school with more and more bruises. Maybe cuts, or a split lip, or a black eye. Unquestioned, Deku said he had been beaten up on the way to school. Bakugo accepted it. After all, Deku was bullied all the time. But Deku refused to give up the name of his attackers, even when threatened to explode. Bakugo's head was in the clouds, and he didn't even realize that something was following him as he downed a soda that he got from a corner shop. The sewers behind him exploded and a green slimy hand immediately covered his face. On instinct, his hand exploded. Oh. A pretty powerful quirk, eh? You'll make a perfectly good vessel. A voice drawled and Bakugo wanted the monster villain thing to just fuck off. He was suffocating. What a way to go. He could barely see Kamui Woods and Death Arms standing a few meters away but not doing anything to help. God damn it. He wasn't going to die before becoming a hero. That would be a huge insult to Deku. Midoriya was prowling on the rooftops again. He was waiting for Shinsu to get out of school so he could help him train more. The kid was getting pretty good at martial arts and had decent strength. Midoriya was certain Shinsu would be able to get into UA. After all, they still had 10 more months until the entrance exam. Plenty of time to brush up on Shinsu's weak points and maybe teach him how to use a few makeshift weapons. He heard a few explosions a few blocks away and went over to investigate. He saw a sludge monster. One that he had been tracking for a while. Despite being a D-class villain, Midoriya did not like how he just suffocated people to death. He saw Death Arms and Kamui Woods. He didn't want to blow his cover. At least there were heroes, but they weren't doing anything. Surely, they weren't thinking of waiting for someone with a more suitable quirk to appear. Midoriya wanted to fassip them. They were heroes. Their society revolved around quirks. Even if their quirks weren't really compatible to fight his particular villain, Midoriya could think of many ways to use their quirks to fight. Like maybe aim for that gigantic yellow eye that definitely looked gooey and non-solid. Midoriya was going to find another villain before another loud explosion echoed out of the alleyway. His first thought was Kaken. He didn't know what to think of his childhood friend. Sure, he kept tabs on him just to make sure he was fine. Kaken had always put him down, but Midoriya knew that he meant something else altogether. His explosive mother was definitely not a good role model when it came to expressing themselves. Kaken had also taken to protecting him. Every time someone had beaten him up, Kaken was there to beat them back. Even when his classmates told him to kill himself, Bakugo went ballistic on them, shaking them up and yelling swear words at them till they dropped. Bakugo and Midoriya had a complicated relationship. But Midoriya wouldn't have it any other way. And when he caught a glimpse of a red eye, looking around desperately for help, Midoriya couldn't stop himself. Izuki shot forward, nailing the sludge monster in the eye with his foot. Wailing, the monster had loosened his grip on Bakugo, and Yuzuki took that chance to wrangle the explosive teen out of the sludge monster's grasp. Bakugo was dumped onto the ground harshly, and Kamui Woods rushed over protectively to shield him from the sludge villain. But now, Yuzuki was within arm's reach of the villain. "You," he hissed. "You're always in the way. You're the one suffocating people." Yuzuki hissed back as the sludge monster wrapped itself around the smaller boy. "You're really annoying, you know." The villain snapped, reaching over to pull off Yuzuki's goggles and crushing them under. "Sludgy foot. I wonder if you can catch me blind. I wonder if you can kill me if you're blind." Yuzuki snapped back, using his free hand to deliver a nasty punch, right in the eye. The villain howled in pain, and Yuzuki swiped off the slime and landed beside Kamui Woods. Bakugo caught sight of those shining green eyes filled with determination. "Deku, you know, I made something in hopes of taking you down. It's just a prototype, but hope you like your gift." Yuzuki yelled, digging something out of his belt pouch and throwing a small button-sized device at the sludge monster. Electricity erupted from the device, but it didn't seem to harm the monster much. He did seem mildly annoyed. Bakugo noticed that he did seem more solid-looking than before. "Ah. That barely harmed me at all." The villain sneered maliciously. "Huh," Yuzuki mocked in a pretense of confusion. "Well, does this hurt?" He lunged at the mound of sludge, digging his heel right into the villain's chest as he hammered him with a roundhouse kick. The loud snap was heard as the villain was sent flying backwards into a wall. He groaned, struggling to sit up as a loud whoosh was heard. "Now, young one. Everything will be alright, for now I'm here." Izuki scoffed as a sharp gust of wind flew past him, spiraling in the alleyway like a small cyclone. The powerful blast of wind sent his hood flying off, and Yuzuki yelped. Memories flew into his mind, memories that he knew were there, but he had always ignored. Memories of his classmates, his parents, his teachers, telling him how useless he was, how he was a burden, how he was trash, how he should have killed himself when he had the chance. Shakily, he jerked his hood back onto his head. He sighed as he slowly swept all the negative thoughts to the back of his head and his breathing evened out. Luckily, everyone was staring at All Might in awe and didn't seem to notice his little breakdown. All except one person. Kaken. Izuki took the small distraction All Might provided and climbed up a pipe before backflipping over a railing onto the roof. He heard a loud Izuku. As he ran off. "What connection do you have to the Vigilante?" Kamui Woods asked, grabbing the explosive boy by the arm as he attempted to chase down the Vigilante. "That couldn't have been Deku, right? Deku died. His father killed him and Inko. In a fire. That made their house explode. No way Deku survived that. They just looked similar, right? Green hair and green eyes were uncommon, but not that uncommon, right? I have nothing. He reminded me of my childhood friend. They looked really similar. He died a long time ago. He was quirkless. Bakugo swallowed some bile that threatened to make its way up his throat. Sorry to hear about that, kid. I'm sure your friend is happy you survived this. Pretty sure that damned Yuzuki brat has some sort of quirk, even if he doesn't show it. Even he's not dumb enough to run into a fight quirkless. Kamui Woods patted his arm on Bakugo's back, but all Bakugo could hear was confirmation that yes, the world still put down those who were quirkless. Because they had some extra toe joint or lacked some weird kind of superpower that used to make humans human. Yeah, my friend was also really smart. I apologized to the young man. I was tracking that villain before and he managed to get away. If I had gotten him sooner, you would not have been assaulted. All Might somehow managed to seek out the blonde explosive boy. All Might, I have a question. Bakugo started. Do you think that a quirkless person could be a hero? Young man, professionals are always risking their lives. I cannot simply say that you can be a hero even without power. But why does it matter to you? You have a quirk? All Might asked. It's for a friend. Bakugo hastily wiped off the tears that threatened to fall. Thank you for answering my question, All Might. As Bakugo ran home, he bit his lip. This was a world that was prejudiced against the quirkless. Bakugo would become a good hero for Deku. Yamada yawned and stretched. His radio show had just ended and he was on his way home. Time to pop out a lat and dump a shit ton of sugar in it before setting a pot of pure black coffee for his Awatu down when he got home from his patrol and maybe figure out a way to wrestle the little jelly packs out of his grip. He was walking past a particularly dark alleyway when suddenly he found a hand on his mouth. Hey. Intel was right. We really got a present, Mick. Boss is gonna be so proud of us. A man laughed, but Yamada quickly twisted out of his grip and kicked his attacker in the face. Yamada growled and prepared to fire off a yell when he suddenly felt his breath sucked out of him and all he managed to get out was a gasp. Ha! You can't yell when you can't breathe, can you? A lady grinned, her hands glowing blue. Yamada could see a hazy blue cloud encircling his head as he tried to hold whatever oxygen he still had in his lungs. The green blur dropped onto the lady like a cannonball and she was knocked out. The figure in green stood up and dusted himself off. Oh. Hi, Present Mick. He gave a small wave, like he didn't just drop out of the sky out of nowhere and stomped a villain flat. You again? The man snarled as his arm began sparking with electricity. You're the one stealing our information, brat. He thrust his hand in Yuzuki's direction and electricity blasted out. No idea what you're talking about. Yuzuki replied in a sing-song voice, dodging the blast and jumping, grabbing onto a nearby water pipe. The man emerged from the shadows and Yuzuki yelped as shadowy arms reached out to grab him. Yeah. Present Mick launched a small sound wave at the arms and they disappeared. TCH. Shadow guy is a problem. Yuzuki grumbled, flicking his goggles a few times. Better. A few more guys dropped from the rooftops and Yuzuki hissed. Both he and Present Mick were surrounded and there were a few newbies that Yuzuki didn't know the quirks of. The woman shot a blast of water at Yamada, but he was able to deflect it with a well-timed yell. The entire ground was soaked from the attack. Another guy took out 2 knives and rushed at Yuzuki. He dodged one and kicked the knife out of the other guy's arms but failed to notice the shadow quirk user behind him. He sank his shadow-infused claws into Yuzuki's shoulder and he hissed in pain before kicking the shadow user into a wall and knocking him out with his own knife. Present Mick was holding his own against the water user, yelling to deflect her water attacks and knocking a few villains away. One seemed to have a scorpion quirk as he had grown a tail and was currently trying to spear Present Mick with it. Another guy had arms that turned into blades and decided to change his targets from Present Mick to Yuzuki. The electric user also decided to change his target from Yuzuki to Present Mick and fired off an electric pulse to stun the voice hero, accidentally shocking the water user in the process. Yuzuki pushed the voice hero out of the puddle and jeered, "That's all you got. Shut up, brat." The electric user snarled, taking a step forward and into the massive puddle before electrocuting Yuzuki, accidentally shocking himself and the water user in the process. Idiot. Yuzuki laughed before coughing out some blood into his mask. Nice job, listener. Present Mick grinned after screeching into the scorpion's ear and blasting him into the guy who could turn his arm into blades. That was quite a nasty shock, though. Are you okay? I've had worse, Yuzuki mumbled, tying up the villain's wrists with zip ties. Present Mick called the police to pick them up and failed to notice the scorpion getting up. With a hiss, the scorpion quirk user lunged at Present Mick and lashed his tail out. Out of the corner of his eye, Yamada saw some movement. He whirled around, only to see a giant tail being whipped towards him. Shit, he cursed internally, bracing himself for the impact before he was pushed out of the way. He felt his head hit the wall, and while we were slightly dizzy from the impact, he only gaped in horror at the scene in front of him. Even if I go down, I'll take one of you down. Boss doesn't care, as long as we beat you up, as long as you're alive, and have your quirks. The scorpion screeched, laughing venomously, as he threw the limp Yuzuki against the ground. I'll tear you apart, limb after limb, and let you suffer. Yamada's voice was stuck in his throat as he saw, dimly, the large slash in the Vigilante's hoodie caused by the villain. He felt even more sick as he saw blood stain the hoodie, and the fury in his gut exploded. He let out a sharp shriek, right in the villain's face. As the villain went down, he turned to check on the downed Vigilante. He was gone. He felt an odd weight in his pocket and Yamada fished out another flash drive. When the hell did he get that? Turning it over, the tape with the name Yuzuki on it caught his eye and he sighed in exasperation at the little green Vigilante. Midoriya hissed as he climbed up a ladder to the roof. Usually, he didn't have any problems doing so, but that damn scorpion had landed a pretty nasty hit on him. At least Present Mick was okay. Midoriya liked listening to the voice hero over the radio. He liked how Present Mick actually interacted with his fans and tried to help them, unlike some stinking flaming trash bag. Midoriya hunched over, gasping for breath. He could feel his muscles tensing and locking up, and he groaned. He didn't just have to worry about bleeding all over a few rooftops. He also had to worry about suddenly becoming paralyzed and maybe falling to his doom or dying some other stupid way on his way home. His brain became fuzzy, but remembered that his dear little student lived around this area. Time to visit one Shinsu Hitachi. Shinsu was not expecting this. His parents weren't home, luckily. They decided to take a week off for some holiday or something, leaving him alone with nothing more than some money for training with Yuzuki had overrun, and he did not want to explain why he was home late. He had heated up some noodles he managed to sneak from the school cafeteria before attempting to finish his homework. Insomnia sucked, and it was well into the night that he heard a knock on his door. Warily, Shinsu had looked through the pinhole, seeing nothing unusual. He was about to write it off as a prank when he heard a harsh cough outside his door. Maybe it was a murderer that wanted to trick him. Or a robber. His common sense screamed danger at him, but one thing that Yuzuki taught him was to trust his instincts and his gut feeling. He didn't have time to think when he was in a fight. 1 second was all they needed to slit his throat. Shinsu opened the door. He was not expecting to see his mentor, leaning against the doorframe with one hand and his other hand on his chest, his green hoodie stained with blood that was slowly dripping to the ground. What happened to you? Shinsu gasped, catching the Vigilante as he stumbled. Yuzuki was small, sure, but he was light. Way too light even for a young adult or even a teenager. Shinsu realized he had no idea how old his teacher was. Sorry, Yuzuki gasped as Shinsu helped him into the sitting room and onto the couch, some stupid paralysis quirk. Didn't want to die or get caught on the way home. Sorry for being a burden. Last time, you saved me. Don't worry about it. Shinsu grunted, digging through Yuzuki's belt pouch for his antiseptic cream and bandages. Do you need help dressing the wound? Shinsu asked, and Yuzuki mumbled, yeah, can you cut the hoodie open? Upon doing so, Shinsu gaped in horror at the wounds that Yuzuki had. There was blood spilling from his shoulder, across his chest to his hip, and Shinsu blanched. He was expecting it to be bad, but there was so much blood, and Shinsu was wondering how the heck Yuzuki was still conscious. Yuzuki coughed and removed his goggles and his mask sluggishly before clumsily fumbling in his pouch before procuring a sewing kit. Shinsu felt so uncomfortable watching Yuzuki sloppily weave the needle and thread in and out of his flesh and excused himself to go fetch a wet towel because he could not stand watching his mentor, a person he had grown so close to, hurting himself, even thought he was technically trying to stitch a wound up. Without painkillers. By the time he had compassed himself, Yuzuki was finished. His fingers were stained with blood and the knife was lying on the ground alongside the needle. Yuzuki didn't move for such a long time, Shinsu would have thought he was dead if not for the fact that his chest was rising and falling. He then just realized that Yuzuki had passed out. Shinsu tried to help Yuzuki with the bandages, though he personally felt that he had done a rather sloppy job, given that though he had to support Yuzuki and wrap him up at the same time, the Vigilante was also really light. Hell, Shinsu could see his ribs clearly, but that definitely wasn't good. What the hell was he eating? Air? He carefully took off the bloodied shirt and hoodie to wash them. Yuzuki would probably want them back. The shirt maybe not, but the hoodie, definitely. With his hoodie gone, Shinsu also realized he had rather deep gashes on his shoulder and set about patching them up too. But the absence of the goggles, hoodie and mask, as well as any blood that was on his face, Shinsu realized just how young his mentor was. Soft, fluffy green hair with freckles adorned his face, and Shinsu wondered how the heck this little kid was a vigilante that took down villains 2 to 3 times his size. The only thing Shinsu noticed that really stood out was his eye bags, and they looked even worse than his own. Shinsu sighed, bringing his homework out to the living room so he could watch over the Vigilante and finish whatever essay his teachers wanted him to finish. It hadn't even been an hour before Yuzuki woke up, thrashing and gasping for air. Shinsu wasn't expecting him to wake up so soon or for him to immediately start reaching behind his neck for something and looking around at everything like they were out to kill him. Hey, it's okay. Shinsu didn't know how to calm the panicking boy and tossed one of his spare jackets at Yuzuki, thinking that he was cold or something. Yuzuki promptly put the jacket on and pulled the hood over his head, sighing in relief. Sorry. Usually I wake up fighting or struggling when I know I didn't sleep on my own accord in case I'm kidnapped and are knocked out and I fall asleep because of some drug or something. Yuzuki mumbled, pulling the hood so that it covered his face entirely. I'm a mess. It's fine, Shinsu sighed again. Are you okay? He had never seen Yuzuki so shaken up before and he was concerned for his mentor. I just don't feel good without something covering my face. Yuzuki admitted, I feel exposed, useless, too much like my old self. I just feel confident with something to hide my identity, something that screams something other than hey, this is a useless little brat. Come beat me up. Shinsu flinched at the way Yuzuki spoke about himself. You're not useless. You're kind, willing to help anyone who needs it, and you're willing to risk your life for others. You're not useless in any way. He did not realize he had said that out loud. Shinsu? Tell me honestly, the green-haired boy looked at Shinsu. Do you think that I could become a hero? Yeah. I mean, you're technically a vigilante, so the police treat you like a villain, but you go around saving people for absolutely no good reason. You can definitely be a hero. I'm technically not a vigilante since I'm quirkless. Shinsu blinked, so? Yuzuki looked at the taller boy in confusion. Everyone says I can't be a hero because I'm quirkless. My teachers, my classmates, even my parents. The smaller boy looked like he wanted to cry, but no tears came out. I should have died in that fire 7 years ago. My mom did, and she was right. I'm useless. Me wanting to be a hero is just a pipe dream. Yuzuki growled, absently rubbing his hair through the borrowed jacket. I'm sorry I'm being a burden. Look, you're teaching me how to fight quirkless. You're fighting off villains without using whatever quirk you have. You're not a burden, so get that silly thought out of your head. Shinsu sat beside the boy. You took care of me all those months ago, and even now you're thinking about other people. I'm pretty sure you're thinking of how to help others while you're stuck here with me. I'm pretty sure that does not fall under being useless. Shinsu decided to file away the fact that Yuzuki said he should have died in a fire. Honestly, you're the best thing that happened to me. I told you before, everyone hates me for my quirk. Everyone thinks I'm gonna be a villain. My parents think my dream of being a hero is stupid and meaningless because of my quirk. You're the first real friend I had in over a decade. We're friends. Yuzuki turned to look at the taller boy. I never really had any friends. I had one good friend, but he kinda pushed me away, but also kinda helped me, so I really don't know. But yeah, meeting you was nice. Both of them sat silently next to each other before Yuzuki spoke up. Izuku. What? Shinsu asked. My real name is Midoriya Izuku, 14 years old. But call me Izuku. I don't want to be called a Midoriya ever again. Well, call me Hitachi then. Shinsu rubbed his neck and Midoriya turned to stand up. Well, I'll go now. I don't want to be a burden. He was promptly pushed back onto the couch by the taller boy. You're not a burden, and I'm putting you under house arrest to let those damned wounds heal. What kind of hero bleeds out while fighting a villain? It was funny seeing the supposedly scary and mysterious vigilante pouting and whining like a kid. Thanks for watching my video, see you next time, till then sayonara.